Welcome back. So we're now doing part 2 of the solo travel episode. Now we're going to chat a little bit about safety while traveling as a solo woman. So safety obviously is a concern for all solo travelers, but especially solo women. One thing that I've noticed in the travel community is this insistence that avoiding problems or violence while traveling can be done through doing the right things and taking precautions or being prepared. And I really feel like this creates a false sense of security by implying that there's a step-to-step guide to safety, because there's obviously not. And implying that there is really minimizes people's understanding of the facts, which is that violence against women is a worldwide epidemic. So you can minimize your exposure to danger, but the reality is that you cannot change the world. And I think that this narrative of being careful is such an insult to women who have been harmed while traveling. Anyone can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I could be in Toronto as much as I could be in Costa Rica. And honestly, some of my worst experiences of violence have taken place in Canada, not abroad. If anything, I'm probably safer when I'm traveling because I'm on alert, way more than I am when I'm moving around Toronto. But bottom line is women aren't safe anywhere, and this is reality. So obviously it's important for us to encourage each other to travel safely and take precautions, but I really encourage people to consider how they do that. Caution the women in your life in a sensitive way, not in a way that makes them feel like you don't trust their judgment or trust their ability to assess danger. Have you experienced this yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I've a lot of people have said when I pick certain countries, why are you going alone as a woman? But I've been in Toronto, same as you said, and things have happened. When I was living in Australia for a year and I came back, I was on the subway in Toronto and someone got stabbed. And I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
So I really feel it can happen absolutely anywhere, violence.
Yeah.
And I think you just, as a woman, or at least from my experience, I'm always aware of my surroundings. It doesn't matter if I'm traveling. If I'm at home in Toronto, walking home late at night, I'm always checking out who's behind me and you just have to.
I know.
So I don't find it so different when I travel. So I do find it gets kind of repetitive when people just keep saying over and over again. And obviously you have to look into countries their history and their politics and stuff like that. And I think your biggest thing is respect the country that you're going in. If you're a woman and they don't wear short sleeves and shorts, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's just common sense, and I think, but I guess the common sense isn't that common. But.
No, not always. But yeah, it's funny because I was assaulted in Morocco, and I remember the assault itself was terrible, but then coming home and having people being well, why did you go to Morocco? You must have known that would happen. And I was people, women, 1 in 4 women in Canada is assaulted in her lifetime. I've been assaulted here as well. So I don't think it's fair to equate that. It belittles me and makes me feel like shit.
Yeah. I do hate the whole idea of that, if you did something differently, it wouldn't have happened. I don't feel like that's true. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Regardless of the precautions that you take.
Yeah. And it's also very limiting. That kind of narrative limits women from exploring the world.
Exactly.
What? I want to go to Morocco. I'm going to go.
I know, I feel the same way.
That's it.
And
And I feel really bad that there are probably a lot of women out there who have limited the way that they experience and explore the world because of this fear that is ingrained in them by these kinds of narratives and warnings and cautions that they spend their whole lives encountering.
Yeah, and I find too when I book trips that people have opinions on, I don't really think about it until they start putting it in my head.
I know.
And then I start to get more anxiety about going because I'm I didn't even think about that. But I don't know. I think people need to approach it in a more a gentler way, not an accusatory way.
Yeah. No, that's totally it. And okay, I'm going to shout out my parents because I feel that they strike a really good balance in this where they do caution me, but they do it in a way that's framed around educating me. So, for example, I went to Myanmar a couple years ago, very controversial place to go, and I'll be the first to admit that I was a little bit ignorant about where I was going. I wasn't super familiar with like the political situation. But I had been in Southeast Asia and other travelers. Like, I'm more likely to base my judgment on like the safety of a country on what other people tell me, like based on their experiences. So I was in Southeast Asia. All these women were telling me it was incredible, best country I've ever traveled. So it was like no question. And we booked to go. And my parents are at home in Canada, like seeing on the news all the headlines about genocide. And so they didn't tell me not to go. They just sent me the occasional article explaining what was going on and like what region, and they just educated me.
See, that's super helpful. My mom does the same thing. Like every time I am talking about a country that I want to go to, she always like does all this research and checks out like the travel advisory and like what people are saying about it. So that, and it's helpful. It's for sure helpful. But some countries always have it.
Oh yeah. The thing is, and this is, my dad will probably be upset for me saying this, but like I'm desensitized to the like high risk now travel advisory, because I'm like, any country that's not Canada has that advisory.
I know.
So when I see that, I'm like, oh, it's probably fine.
I just like, whenever I see that, I look into it more. And honestly, my mom is like such a crazy researcher. Like she'll find everything. So I'm always like, okay, thanks. Like sometimes I just have to tell her, and I'm like, I'll just wait. She'll just send me all the information.
It's the same with my dad. But if there's one thing I've learned, like on a large, just like general safety scale, a lot of it has to do with region. And this is something I only started realizing, like, I think I realized it first when I was in India, because India, like, for the most part is safe, but there's certain regions that you should avoid. And we were just in Jordan, and it was the same situation there, where, like, you don't go to the borders, but within the country, like in the center, it's pretty safe.
That's good to hear.
So I think a lot of people are turned off of a country just because they only know about the problem areas.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was the reality in Myanmar. Like, I don't know if I would go there now for ethical reasons, but in terms of like my safety as a tourist there, I was totally safe.
Oh, that's good.
Because like the tourist areas, they protect them.
Yeah, for sure.
It's making money for them.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think that solo female travelers have to individually decide for themselves like what policies or precautions they feel are necessary to protect themselves. But I also feel like women should have the agency to make that judgment for themselves. I don't think that it's anyone's right to criticize what a woman deems safe or unsafe for herself. Like, I know that I can be overcautious at times. I remember, like, in Morocco, my male companions being really frustrated with me because I was unwilling to go to, like, certain places or go into, like, certain situations. But that was directly related to my personal experience, which, like, had not been positive. But I think, like, people forget that you need to respect, like, other people's perceptions of their own safety.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so overall, there's a lot to unpack, I think. But what it boils down to definitely is that, like, women shouldn't limit themselves. And, like, there's definitely benefit in traveling solo. Can totally be empowering. I think it's just important to, like, have a deep think about what you're okay with and what you need to feel safe and, like, where you draw the line for your own safety and concerns.
Definitely.
So, tell us a little travel story.
Well, I'll tell you about my experience in Morocco. So I had similar, I had been thinking about Morocco for a really long time. And I had heard very mixed reviews on Morocco from a lot of different travelers that I knew. So I had 2 female travelers that went alone, and they had experiences that weren't good. And so they cautioned me about that. And I was like, okay, like, good to know. So when I booked the trip, I decided I would do a tour. But I wanted to see Casablanca, so I went a few days early on my own. And from the beginning, it was kind of a stressful experience because I had so many opinions from people, and I don't know if it was like what was going on in my life at the time, but it was like really affecting me. Like, I had people be like, don't get mugged. And they were like, why are you going to Morocco alone? And then I also had someone say, like, can't you just pick a normal country for once?
Oh my God.
And I was like, I was like, I just want to discover the world. Let me live my life.
What is a normal country?
Exactly. So I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to book it. So I started to get really in my head, like, after I booked it. And my flight was really stressful. So I flew from Montreal to Casablanca, and it was one of the worst flights I've ever had. Like, there was just like, have you ever been on a flight where there's just like so much going on?
Yeah.
And it's just like so anxious.
Yeah.
So that was going on, and then the guy in the row next to me passed out. And then so there was like a whole bunch of paramedics, or like the stewardess were like all around him, like taking his blood pressure. And I was kind of like, what's happening? And then that like calmed down. He was okay. Like, he ended up being fine, and we only had like 2 hours left of the flight. And then as we're landing, a fight broke out at the back of the plane.
What?
Like, screaming match. And they had to be like separated. It was 2 women, and so the stewardess had to like break them apart before we landed. And then the fighting continued like while we were landing. And
do you know what they were fighting about?
I still don't know. I was kind of like, I'm just gonna focus on me. And then as soon as it landed, I was like, okay, I need to get off this plane. So then I land, and I couldn't find the driver that I had set up. So I started like panicking.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any contact for like who was picking me up. So I was like, okay, I was like, focus. I was like, you've done this before, it's going to be fine. So I ended up finding him, but it was because he didn't have his sign up. He was just like standing there talking to his friend. So I went up to someone, I was like, do you know if like this person is here? And they're like, oh yeah, he's right there. And I was like, okay, thanks. And then we get in the car with 3 guys. Not 1.
No.
3. And so I started to kind of be like, I don't know if this is normal. So I got my phone out and I turned my dad on, which I normally don't. But I was like, I have to track this. I need to know where we're going to make sure we're going to the right hotel. And they were barely acknowledging me. Like, it was like I wasn't there. Not speaking English. Not telling me like how long the drive was or anything like that. So I was just like panicking. So then the guy I met at the airport decides to get out of the car, and he's like, this guy's gonna take you the rest of the way. And I was like, what?
I would be so scared.
Yeah, so I was like, it's okay, it's gonna be fine. I was like talking myself through it. I was like, they don't look like they're gonna kidnap me. So I was like, kind of like,
at any point did you consider jumping out of the car?
I didn't.
I would probably be thinking about that.
I didn't think about that because I was watching them, and I was like, they're too calm to be kidnapping me. I was like, their body language doesn't seem like they would.
Wouldn't that be the body language though?
I
if
don't
they were
know.
trying to kidnap you? Like,
you know, thinking back, probably, but it ended up being fine. I got to the hotel, and then I check in, and I was like petrified at this point, right? And I had the whole day to myself, and I was like, what am I gonna do? So I'm like sitting in my hotel room starving, and I was like, okay, I have to go out. So I eventually went out to this cafe, and all the guys were just staring at me. Like, they were just staring me down, like, what is this girl doing alone? Like, what is this white girl doing traveling alone? And so luckily there was like this really lovely woman working in the cafe, and she couldn't speak English, but we like made it work. Like, she brought me like mint tea right away.
Aww.
And then she was super, super helpful, and I ended up taking the rest of that food, and I was like, this is gonna be my dinner. I was like, because I'm not leaving my hotel like after this whole experience. And that's when I went back to my hotel, asked them about touring Casablanca. It was gonna be like $175 for a driver, so I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. And then they told me that there was another couple there that wanted to do it, and they were Canadian, and asked if I wanted to join. And I was like, I would love to join. Like, he's like, okay, I'll call you if they agree to it. And I'm like, perfect. So I get to my hotel, I'm like in my room, the phone rings, and he tells me that they agreed. So he's like, so just be downstairs at 9:30 tomorrow morning. I was like, perfect. I'm just gonna stay in my room, watch something on my iPad, and travel the world tomorrow. And then as I'm on the phone with him, he's like, are you gonna go out tonight? And I was like, nope. And he was like, are you scared? And I was like, and he's like, I can take you out. And I was like, no, I'm okay. He's like, I'll take you out, I'll protect you. I was like, no, I'm good, I'm just gonna stay here. And then like I get off the phone, and I'm like, I'm gonna lock my door. So that was like my first initial experience with Morocco, but like after that it was like completely fine.
Yeah.
But I was like, thank God I'm doing a tour, because I was like, I've traveled a lot on my own.
Yeah.
And that was an unreal experience. And I was texting my dad. He's like, I'm so proud of my world traveling daughter. I was like, Dad, I'm literally in my hotel room. I was like, I am not brave right now at all.
That was me, like, the entire trip in Morocco, just, like, scared of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's for good reason.
It is for good reason.
When people are following you and, like, making those kinds of comments, it really gets in your head.
And the guys, they're super intimidating because it's just their culture where they just stare you down. And if you look at them, like, kind of like, don't look at me like you do in Toronto, they don't stop. They're just like, oh, they like it.
Yeah.
Like, they're encouraged by it.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a real thing because I know... I'm not sure, like, what it is that culturally causes this, so I can't speak for Morocco, but I can speak for India, that I was told there not to maintain eye contact with men because they see that as, like, you showing interest in them.
Right.
And so I actually learned, like, we were there long enough that it became, like, a survival thing where I would always keep my eyes down. Yeah. And I never smiled.
That's another thing I read before I went to Morocco, because I'm a very big smiler. I always smile at people, like, all the time.
Yeah.
And I read that you shouldn't smile at people in Morocco. So, like, we're guys. And I was like, oh, God, I'm going to have to really, like... So I did what you did. I was just, like, looked down instead of, like, making eye contact with anybody.
Yeah. Some people would disagree with this, but, like, there were days in Marrakesh where I would put in headphones and I would just walk with, like, blinders on through the city, just, like, blaring music, not paying attention to anyone around me, just, like, I have a mission, I know where I'm going, like, I'm not engaging with anyone. Yeah, so that was my tactic.
It's a good tactic.
All right, okay. It's rant time because I need to bring up something that I noticed on social media this week, and I did do a little Reddit searching. I couldn't find anyone who had also noticed this, so I think it's, like, an interesting topic to bring up. So 2 of the influencers that I follow, women, are in Saudi Arabia right now on press trips. Both of them have large followings, and the fact that they're both there but not there together indicates that, like, it's definitely a press event. Like, Saudi Arabia's tourism board probably invited them. Like, it's probably completely covered. They're being brought everywhere. And this makes total sense because I did a little Googling and I discovered that Saudi right now is investing a lot of money into tourism projects. So they're actually really trying to promote tourism to Saudi Arabia, which is, like, a wild concept to me right now, but okay. This is what makes me uncomfortable, though. These influencers are promoting a country that is actively engaged with ongoing human rights violations. I'm just going to say, I haven't disclosed this on the podcast before, but I do work for a human rights organization. That is my day job. And so it's too many times that the country Saudi Arabia, like, comes onto my radar. So I'm quite aware of, like, the ongoing issues there. Like, for example, in Saudi Arabia, like, male guardianship is practiced, which means that, like, women can't leave the country unless they have a letter from, like, their male guardian saying that they have permission. Yeah, so these influencers are doing this promotion in exchange for, like, a very luxurious trip because the things that they're posting are, like, these beautiful landscapes of, like, desert, and they're in these, like, private vehicles, and they're on, like, the rooftops of these beautiful skyscrapers. So definitely luxurious. And I'm certain that, like, because they're being escorted around, they're having a very limited and controlled experience of Saudi Arabia, which is a huge element of this rant. Because what I'm trying to say is that I think it is irresponsible for these influencers to be idealizing and romanticizing Saudi. Because they're portraying it as like a viable destination, which it's not. Like, I couldn't get a visa to go because I'm not married. I think you can get a work visa, but you can't get a tourist visa. I think some countries can, but Canada currently you can't.
That's so crazy.
So it's kind of strange that they're, like, hardcore promoting this as, like, the next big destination. And I guess just, like, overall, I wish that influencers, and I've thought this before about, like, big travel influencers, I wish that they took into account the, like, ethical implications of their travels, especially as women travelers, because I feel like you have an added responsibility to be truthful. And we talked about this in the Morocco episode, to be, like, realistic to the people who follow you and look up to you about the situation in that country, and how it could impact you and your safety. Like, I think that you have a responsibility not to encourage travel to destinations that are questionably safe. And like if you're not traveling Saudi, like with the tourism board, with an escort all the time, I don't think it's safe.
No, I agree with you.
It felt like kind of propaganda.
Yeah, it probably is a bit. Yeah.
I just thought, it rubbed me the wrong way. And like the first influencer that I saw that was there, I was like, oh, like interesting choice. But then when I noticed that 2 of them, and I did more research and like there's other ones there right now as well, it's clearly just a big like press move.
So were these influencers, are they married? Or
No,
they're interesting.
Not. They're not. Most of them are American, though, and I think if you're American, you can get a tourist visa. Okay. It's not easy, though. In our LGBTQ plus episode, our guest Zach mentioned that he follows an influencer who is queer, and he also went to Saudi Arabia on this like luxurious trip. And he was voicing the same concern.
Right.
So it's just like an interesting trend I'm seeing happening.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. I want to believe that, like, if I was a massive travel influencer, I would have the guts to say no to that kind of trip.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You already did.
Yeah.
Well, no one's offering me trips to Saudi Arabia or anywhere. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod today to talk with us about solo travel. Is there anything you want to plug, like Instagram or your teaching?
Sure. Like, you can definitely follow my Instagram. I have travel pictures all the time.
Yes.
It's just at Laurelle.Alexandra.
Sweet.
So it's pretty easy to find, and it's open to the public.
Ooh.
I do have a travel blog that I don't keep up with at all. But it is there. It is available. It's called Abroad with Lola, if anyone wants to check it out.
Nice. I'll check it out. Everyone's on Instagram now. Big thank you, of course, to Katie, our producer, because here she is again making us sound so professional. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Instagram. So it's at alpacamybags.pod. We also have a website, which is alpacamybags.ca. If you want to look at my personal website, it is pinatravels.ca. If you like what you're hearing, please let us know by reviewing the podcast. You can also subscribe while you're at it. But yeah, reviews are where it's at because that really helps us out, guys. And of course, tune in every other Wednesday for more episodes. And I hope you all get to alpaca your bags soon. Until next time.